Tilehurst End podcast
by Reading fans for Reading fans.
Hello and welcome to the Tilehurst End podcast extra in association with the Working Paper. After a 2-week break, we are back to talk all things Reading Football Club. I'm delighted to be joined once again by the Working Paper's Tom Crocker. Tom, hi, how are you?
Hi Ollie, good, thank you. Got a brand new microphone and we're raring to go again.
Raring to go. The Reading squad have had their trip to Spain and we've all been refreshed by our new microphones.
Yes, exactly. I think the Patreon campaign's come through, so get another plug in for that.
Indeed, yep. And we will start then at the City Ground on Tuesday night, where Reading drew 1-1 with Nottingham Forest. By all accounts, this was sort of a game of two halves, really, with Reading dominating the first 45 minutes and indeed opening the scoring through Omar Richards' cool finish. But Forest fought back after the break and eventually got an equaliser with 5 minutes to play through Lee Tomlin, who of course also scored a late equaliser for Cardiff against Reading back in December, so he's become sort of a bogey player for Reading this season. But for me, Tom, this was a massively disappointing result, I think, especially considering that it should have been a game that could have given Reading a much needed win against a team sort of sitting one place above them in the table, and also a team much like Reading, also horrendously out of form as well. And although the performance perhaps could have been said to have perhaps improved a little, but sort of with games against the likes of Derby and Sheffield United and Wolves coming up, this was a big opportunity that Roy should have taken.
Yeah, I think there's two ways of looking at it. I think obviously some people are happy with just getting a point, but I mean it's like you said. I think the big factor is the fixtures that are still to come. Obviously, if they go and beat Derby, then I think it's turned into a pretty good point. 4 points in a week will look pretty good. But the fact they've got Derby and then Sheffield United and Wolves, it means that you looked at the Forest game and thought maybe pick up the win there, and then you'll have a bit more breathing room. But I think they're still sort of 4 points clear of the relegation zone now, so it's still a case of looking over the shoulders. And I think it's even more frustrating where you lead the game for so long and then let it slip right at the end, and then it feels like another disappointment rather than if you snatch a late equaliser. I'm sure Forest will be quite buoyed by that goal and they'll try and push on now, because I think both teams they only picked up 2 wins between them in the last sort of 20-odd games. So yeah, it was certainly one Reading after their long break as well. Obviously their trip away, they would have looked at picking up all 3 points in that one, and especially after getting the lead. But I think you've got to sort of look now, and if they win on Saturday, you look back at it and go, it's been a good week, I think. So right now it's perhaps a little bit disappointing, but yeah, I think that's probably more with an eye on what games are to come and people not too optimistic perhaps about the chances in the next few.
Yeah, I mean, I think just from my point of view, I think it's just hugely frustrating to concede a late goal, especially for a group that's probably low on confidence already. But do you think that training camp in Spain will have done anything to sort of help that issue, sort of like to make them a closer unit and perhaps sort of more capable of not letting this result affect them as they have perhaps in the past?
We just have to sort of wait and see, I suppose. They obviously came out of a lot of positive things from that trip, as they sort of said, but the only way of really showing if that's helped is with results on the pitch, and obviously they've not won that game on Tuesday, let it slip late on, and I suppose, like you say, the big thing from that is how you bounce back from a disappointment. And yeah, the only way we can really know is how they come out and play on Saturday. Obviously, the home form's been really the biggest problem all season. I don't think the away form's too bad, really, but it's the home form and whether they can raise their game to try and see. Not sure what the sort of crowd will be like towards them. It's been a bit of a hostile place recently, so it's whether they can sort of rise above that, and it's down to them performing on the pitch, really. Obviously, you hope the break away has helped, and obviously the sort of team bonding that comes with that, and the squad's in a strong place as well, sort of injury-wise, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be pushing on now. But yeah, like you say, it's going to be a case of sort of waiting and seeing, really. You hope that it's done them some good, but so far they obviously didn't win on Tuesday, and they still need the points to pull away from the bottom three.
Yeah, I mean, there were certainly a lot of positive messages coming out of that training camp in Spain. I think all the interviews that they gave, sort of, I think they interviewed the sports scientists as well as Stam and a couple of the players, and they all sort of thought that this was sort of the break that they needed, sort of get a bit of vitamin D inside them with the sunshine, and sort of bring them, like, sort of spending not 24/7, but virtually all the time together as players. So hopefully, I think, obviously we had the 10-day break, so I think you'd rather be doing that than sort of be training every couple of days and back at home and perhaps not seeing as much of each other. And certainly in a relegation scrap, you sort of want to put your body on the line for each and every player. So I think for me, I think comments sort of about some people suggesting it was a glorified holiday, I think that was a bit silly, to be honest with you. But I do want to talk about Omar Richards, of course, who have got Reading's only goal, his first for the senior team, having just turned 20 years old. And he's also just returned from a brief spell on the sidelines through injury. But can you see him nailing down the left-back spot for the rest of the season, do you think? Obviously, Tyler Black is not having the best time of it lately, and perhaps Leandro Bakun is sort of better used in midfield.
Yeah, I think that's a question we've asked lots of times over the last few weeks, and everyone seems to want to see Omar Richards given the chance. And obviously he was in the team, and then he came off injured, and I can't remember which game it was now, but he came off at half-time in one of the games, and then it's obviously he loses his place then, but he's come back in, and he's got his goal as well, good finish from him, and he maybe had a good goal line block as well at the other end, so he's... he certainly staked his claim. Like you say, the options over there are sort of sparse, really. And I think you want to use Bacuna in midfield, and Blackett's out of favour. So you would imagine he'll keep his spot. I mean, you can never quite second guess what Stam's going to do, but on the face of it, you'd imagine now that it's sort of his spot to lose, really, after the way he plays on Tuesday. And it seems like a question we've been asking ever since Jordan Obita got injured, really, way back in sort of September. It's a question that's come up, and whether Omar Richards is ready. And Now he's sort of a regular in the squad, and you'd imagine that it's going to be his spot, and I would certainly expect to see him start on Saturday, and then it's just down to him really to keep hold of that place.
As for how the table looks then, as they have been for the last couple of weeks, Reading remain in 18th, 4 points above the drop zone, 4 points below Forest in 17th. They do have a game in hand over most teams around them. I think only Hull and Barnsley also have the additional game to play, but as we were saying earlier with the one of the games coming up, it certainly still remains a fairly worrying time at the club, doesn't it?
Yeah, until they pick up sort of the wins, and it's going to stay that way. There's sort of gaps opening up around the table now as well. Obviously, Forest, they could have closed the gap right in on them, but let that slip later on, and it's still just 4 points, which is nothing really. I was just say this, they're still 18th, which I can't remember when they weren't 18th. Now it feels like a long time. I suppose if they stay there for the rest of the season, it'll be okay. But yeah, you have to think at some point some teams are going to claw them back. I know they're obviously level with Bolton now, so there's obviously if Reading lose on Saturday, there's a potential of dropping down a couple of spots as well. But yeah, they got the game in hand on Tuesday, so there's 2 games coming quickly. And you'd think that after those 2 we'll have a bit of a clearer picture. But yeah, right now until they start winning games, then it's going to be. They're obviously not going to get any further away, and 4 points is not a big gap at all. So it's still worrying times, and they still got to pick up the wins, even though they are difficult games. I think if they can get through these 3 games in a similar position, they'd be relatively happy. I think they can then push on in the games after that. But yeah, until they pick up the wins, they're still going to be looking over their shoulder, and it's going to be a tough couple of weeks coming up, I think.
Yeah, I certainly would still take 18th at the end of the season. Certainly, if we can remain 18th, as you said, after these 3 tough games against sides all battling for promotion, I think that would certainly be a positive bit of news. In terms of news then, it's actually been a fairly quiet couple of weeks on the news front since we last recorded, but there has been a rather disappointing announcement, and that was that Reading have been kicked out, unfortunately, of the FA Youth Cup for fielding an underage player in their 4-1 win over Colchester United in the last round. And to play, so the rules state to play in the competition this season, you have to have been at least 15 years old on the 31st of August last year, and Royals picked left back Imari Samuels, who was 14 at that cut-off point for that game against Colchester. What's your view on the situation, Tom? I mean, from my point of view, I think I understand the rules, and the rules are there for a reason. But for me, I think just to set a lower age limit on the FA Youth Cup, a competition that should be promoting younger players pushing above their age group, seems a little bit, well, not silly, but I think it doesn't really make sense to me personally. But yeah,
it's just a huge shame, I think, first of all, for all the guys that have got through. Obviously, the rest of the team are obviously all eligible to play, and they've comfortably got through the tie, and they're set to play Arsenal in the next round, and it's obviously such a glamorous competition for that age group. So first and foremost, I think that's the biggest disappointment. Obviously, they've tried to appeal it and what have you, but it's not looking likely at the moment. But yeah, it doesn't seem to make too much sense on the face of it, where that whole same age group, including Samuels, played in the under-18s the other week altogether, and a lot more of the 15-year-olds did as well. So obviously that's a big thing for Reading, is bringing these young players through, and if they're old enough, they should be ready enough to play. If they're ready enough, they should be old enough to play in these competitions, I think. So it doesn't seem to make too much sense. I think the sort of idea about it is sort of the earlier rounds. I think they were saying on in that statement that obviously professional clubs, if they're trying to just fielding really young players against the lower league sides maybe, but it doesn't seem to make too much sense to me, and it's perhaps something they need to look at. I know there was a sort of a similar case, I think, with Southend maybe a few years ago, where they were trying to use that as a way to try and get out of it, but essentially obviously they are the rules, so that Reading they've got to stick to them. I don't think they can really go back and look at another case, because I suppose that's probably strengthened the idea even more that Reading should have known about the rules when somebody has already been punished for it. So Yeah, it doesn't seem like they've really got a way out of it. But I think going forward, it's something that the FA really, it doesn't seem to make too much sense, and certainly something that's to be looked at, because otherwise these players are just, if they're good enough to play in these teams, and if they're allowed to play in the under-18 league the whole season, but they're not allowed to play in the Youth Cup, then it just seems to be halting their progress, really, which doesn't seem to make too much sense to me. But I think a few decisions the FA make don't seem to make too much sense. But there we go. It's disappointing, and it doesn't look like they're going to be back in the competition, so they're just going to have to sort of just try and make sure they don't make the same mistake next year, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, as the saying goes, if you're good enough, you're old enough, I suppose. And you mentioned the appeal there. I think that at the time of the statement, which was last Thursday, so a week ago today, I think, the club said they were considering an appeal against the removal, but we've not heard anything since. So I presume that they've either decided against it or it has failed. Yeah,
so we haven't heard anything on it. I think the deadline for that was earlier this week, so you would imagine that they would have come out and said if they had found out otherwise. I mean, we'll try and find out a bit more when we go down there on Saturday. But as far as we're aware, it's just a case of as that statement, they went to a lengthy hearing, I think, with the FA about it, and they've been kicked out of the competition. And as far as we're aware now, that's the way it's going to stay, unfortunately.
Yeah, they did say they contacted the FA sort of immediately the following morning after realising their mistake. Do you think this was just sort of a silly error by the club, or is it sort of like an example of sort of the mismanagement going on at the moment, or is it just a simple case that they weren't quite sure of the rules?
Yeah, I think it's probably just a admin error. Obviously, this sort of thing happen, and I think especially when these guys are playing every week in the league games anyway, they probably didn't even think about it, and they probably then they've heard about it afterwards maybe, and suddenly realise they've made the mistake. And I suppose they have to go and tell the FA straight away, otherwise it will probably be dug up maybe in later rounds if they keep getting through, and then they'll get thrown out even later, which would be even worse, I suppose. So I think it sounds like a simple admin error, which is obviously, like I say, a huge shame, but it's just one of those things, really. I don't think it's anyone massively to blame or anything untoward, really. It just sounds like a bit of an error on someone's part.
Yeah. One other brief bit of news then from the past week came courtesy of Joseph Mendes, of all people, if you can remember him, who gave an interview to a French magazine recently. Obviously, he's French, claiming that a move to Bolton for him on deadline day fell through. And I thought he was still injured personally, but with his contract up in the summer, you'd certainly expect him to move on then, wouldn't you?
You'd imagine so. I mean, we've asked about him plenty of times. Obviously, like you say, he's still coming back from injury. He didn't make that trip to Spain. He's still on rehab from that with his knee injury, I think it is. And he obviously started the season, played a few games, and I think he's sort of been battling injuries ever since he joined Reading, really, last summer. So it certainly came out of the blue, that story about Bolton. I think, like you say, it's unlikely he's going to be in the plans much after this season, just because of the sort of number of strikers they've got, and obviously his injury problems as well. But whenever we've asked about him, it's simply been a case of his main focus has been back on getting fit rather than looking to send him out anywhere. So maybe Bolton decided that it would be worth just taking a bit of a gamble, bring him in, get him fit in a few weeks or so, and maybe he could help them try and stay up. Obviously, when you look on the face of it, strengthening Bolton perhaps isn't in Reading's best interest either, given the situation in the table. But we're not too sure how close it was. Obviously, Joseph seems to think it sort of fell through on deadline day. Maybe they were looking to bring someone else in or something. But he's still injured anyway, so he wouldn't have been playing for them for the next few weeks, and he's just on the road to recovery, really. And maybe he'll have a couple of games for Reading before the end of the season. But I think he is back in training now. He was mentioned a couple of weeks ago that he is sort of getting back to fitness, but obviously he hasn't played for such a long time. You can't imagine he'll be in the first team, especially with the options Reading have got anytime soon, really.
Yeah, I think Bolton, they let Gary Medine go to Cardiff, so we're keen to get a striker, and I think they got Zach Clough in the end from Forest, obviously their former player as well. That's probably a better option than a half-fit Joseph Mendes, to be honest. But on to this weekend's game, then, rocketing on through the podcast extra, and Reading host Derby County on Saturday. A side who they surprisingly beat 4-2 at Pride Park back in November, and also Derby, a side who played last night instead of Tuesday night, drawing 2-2 to Leeds, meaning that Reading will have had 24 hours more recovery time than their opponents, and they'll probably need it as well, considering that Rams currently sit fourth in the Championship table. They were actually second a couple of weeks ago, but have been on indifferent form of late, winning just once in the last 6 games. But we said this plenty of times this season, and it's never seemed to make a difference. But this is certainly one of the better times to play one of the better teams in the division, isn't it?
Yeah, possibly. It's like I say, they won 4-2 away from home, which sort of came massively out of the blue. It seems to be more of a fluke rather than the norm really this season. But it was a really good result, and they'll be full of confidence still from that game. I imagine it was a really good performance on the day. And yeah, Derby though, you look at them, they're always up there every year it seems now, and you have to imagine at one point they will make that breakthrough. And I think after last night, Wednesday night, I think they scored late on and got a draw, which, like we said, obviously the same result as Reading. But like we said earlier, the fact Derby scored the late goal means they'll be more confident, you imagine, from that. And you look at the table as well, and I think obviously we go back to Reading last season, they were in a similar position, and I think Derby will be probably going all out for the win this weekend. Now they'll be desperate to break into that top two rather than scrabbling around in the playoffs where they've had so much disappointment in recent years. So you'd imagine they'll be going all out for the win this weekend rather than just a draw, which maybe could open things up a bit for Reading. But yeah, I think you say they've dropped out of form a little bit, but it's going to be a tough task. I think Derby scored the third most and conceded the third least in the league, so that suggests they should be up where they are, and they're going to be extremely tough to break down. And they've got such strength and depth on the bench as well. They always bring on top. They seem to have so many strikers they can bring on at any one time, and obviously Matej Vydra coming back will probably find the net, you'd imagine. And they've got a lot of quality in that team, and it's going to be a tough game for Reading, I think. But like you say, they're not in fantastic form, and if Reading can get in the lead, maybe that'll help them out a little bit. But yeah, I think it's going to be a tough one.
You mentioned Vydra there, and he's the Championship's top scorer this season with 17 goals, and he's finally found form again after his less than impressive spell at Reading. I think that just sort of makes it even more hugely frustrating that it didn't quite work out for him here, doesn't it? Yeah,
he was brilliant at Watford, and then obviously came to Reading, and there's high expectation of him. Really, he had a few good games and showed what he can do, but over a sustained spell of time, it didn't really work for him. I suppose he was sort of playing in a struggling team as well, which perhaps didn't help towards the end of that season. But it just didn't work out for him at Reading, and it seems strange when you look at before and after he's done so well. So you have to wonder quite what the problem was here. But yeah, he says he's top scorer in the Championship, and I suppose he'll be desperate to try and do that in the Premier League at some point. And I know he's played for his country. I'm not sure if they made the World Cup actually, but he's
Republic.
I'm not too sure.
Not too sure myself.
But yeah, he's played for them a few times as well, and he's a good striker at this level. Certainly scores goals, and he'll be one for Reading to try and keep an eye on Saturday.
One striker, of course, who won't feature is Chris Martin, obviously, who's on loan from Derby, so he'll be ineligible for the game. But other than that, I presume that Jaap Stam got pretty much the exact same squad to choose from as Forest on Tuesday night. Yeah,
I think John Swift is getting closer and closer, so you'd imagine he'd be involved. And like you say, no Chris Martin, so you'd have thought Bodvarsson will probably just come in. Obviously, Jan wasn't in the squad on Tuesday night. I'm not entirely sure if I don't think there's an injury there. So which I suppose when you look at the squad and the players they had, it made sense to not necessarily have two strikers on the bench. So perhaps he's just been left out, rotated out. Obviously, he's not in the best of form, but you'd imagine he'd come in and take Martin's place in the squad, whether it's from the start or probably from the bench. You'd imagine that would be the only change. And apart from that, you'd like to think they'd try and keep the same team. Really, seeing as they obviously picked up a point. I don't think they picked up any injuries. They've seemed to have found a decent balance at the back now, with Richards on the left and Bakuna into midfield. Liam Kelly back in the team, playing a bit further forward as well, which seemed to help him. And yeah, you'd imagine it'll be probably 10 out of the 11 just with the switch and Martin up front. You would hope anyway. Obviously, you can never be too sure. Yeah, he seems to like to rotate his side around, but yeah, I think I can't see too many changes. I think that'll probably be for the good of the team, really.
Obviously Jan is 36 years old, so I think giving him a rest every once in a while is never a bad thing, certainly with, as you mentioned, his form there as well. It was interesting to see Callum Harriott out with the squad. He flew out to Spain with the squad. I'm not sure if he trained or anything, but he was certainly out there. Does that suggest that he's perhaps edging closer? But obviously, he's having been out for a year. I'd imagine they want to be very, very careful with him. Yeah,
he's been in training quite a bit, I think, since sort of January time. He's trained quite a lot, but every time he's about to play for the 23s, he breaks down again. But it's obviously, I think he wasn't initially scheduled to go to Spain, I don't think. But obviously, he's obviously seems to be clear of the injury now. He's gone out and trained with them a bit, and Yeah, he needs to get under 23 minutes first. I think that's the prime thing for him. But the fact he is training shows he is pretty close to fitness, and you would offer something different to the team if they can get him fit. But like you say, it's been sort of over a year now, and it's going to take quite a while to get him up to full match speed. But yeah, he seems to be back sort of fitness-wise. It's just every time it's just a little problem with his hamstring. They're trying to be as careful as they possibly can with him. But yeah, he did make that trip, and I imagine he'll be playing for the 23s in the next couple of weeks or so.
Yeah, you just hope he doesn't have that. You just hope he doesn't have another breakdown. In a sense, it just seems to be every time he gets very, very close. I mean, I think I remember both of us speaking to him at the kit launch last summer.
Yeah.
And he said that he was ready to go in sort of August, September time. And then another niggle on that hamstring, and he's back out for another 6 months or so, which is very, very unfortunate for him, because certainly from what we saw of him in his first couple of months in the Reading shirt, obviously he got the 2 against MK Dons, scored a very, very good goal against Norwich on Boxing Day, and as you say, certainly would add something different out on the wings, especially with the likes of Gareth McCleary sort of being indifferent, Sonny Aluka not really living up to expectations, and Mo Barrow sort of dipping out of form since December time. So certainly I think Harriet, if they can get him fit, but as you say, mentioned, got to be very, very careful with him because of the length of his injury. As for the prediction league then, what are you going to go for this weekend, Tom? I think Westy was the only one to correctly predict that Reading would draw at Forest on Tuesday.
Yeah, I think it's going to be. I think they could end up losing it again. I think the home form is just such an issue, and I think it's more the fact Derby now they need to go for these wins if they want to try and get in the top 2. And I think it could be quite tight. I think Reading will probably, if they can give them a decent game, and I think they can try and take something from that. And then I think they got a better chance against Sheffield United on Tuesday. But I think I'll have to go for 2-1 to Derby on Saturday. Yeah,
I mean, being totally honest, I can't really see us getting much out of any of our next 3 games against Derby, Sheffield United and Wolves, and so I'd certainly be relatively content, at least with a point perhaps at the weekend, but I think I'd probably agree with you and perhaps a 2-0 or 2-1 Derby win, to be honest. As we come towards the end of the show, then what can we expect to see on the Working in Paper in the next couple of days, Tom?
Yes, we've got Sim's column going up today or tomorrow. It's on Stam's tactics at Forest, how he sort of got it wrong in the second half. So that's a good read from there, which will go up. And then, then it's on to Saturday and Tuesday. We'll be there for the games, and it'll all be up on workingonpaper.com and on my Twitter at Tom J. Crocker.
Fantastic stuff, and remember to stay tuned to the Titlist End as well on all our social media channels as well. The main show will return ahead of the Sheffield United game next Tuesday, and then myself and Tom will be back to look back on that one and preview the trip to runaway leaders Wolves next Saturday, a game in front of the Sky cameras. That will be this time next week, next Thursday. As ever, thank you to Tom for joining me this week.
Cheers, Ollie.
No worries at all, and thank you at home for listening to this week's podcast extra. We hope you've enjoyed it, and come on you Rs.
Get social with the boys.
Find them on Twitter
at the Tilehurst End
and facebook.com/the Tilehurst End.